Hello ladies and gentlemen, GameStay here. This is the tank guide for Normal and Heroic Korog, the 6th boss in Highmaul. Taking this boss is not too complicated. There are a few basic abilities to consider, such as the Arcane Expel magic that forces tank swaps, as well as the positioning and management of the adds during the barrier recharge phase. But otherwise, tanking is actually quite simple for this encounter. The first thing to briefly discuss is positioning. So obviously at any given time you'll just have one tank on the boss, and that tank should decide where to position not only the boss, but where to face him. And you want to ideally position him in the center unless your raid has a specific strategy or location that they're using instead. We found the center to be best because of the range targeting that the boss does frequently when he drops suppression fields, which we'll talk about later. But if your raid has difficulty moving out of the center when necessary for his barrier recharge phase, which you won't directly be involved with as a tank, if your raid has difficulty with that, then you should not tank him in the center because that will screw that up. However, if you can do it, keeping him in the center is fine. More importantly, however, is his facing, particularly your position as a tank while he's on you. The reason for this is because of the main tank swap mechanic, the Expel magic Arcane. You do not want anyone to be in your location at the time, nor behind you as a tank, because you're going to have to kite around with a pretty dangerous ability chasing you. So try to position yourself so that there aren't any other players behind you, such as ranged or healers. Now, depending on your UI, you may have an indicator that will show the current barrier remaining on the boss. And when this barrier fades, after doing enough damage to him, he'll move to the center of the room and start to recharge. This recharge phase lasts 20 seconds, where he's just stationary there. And during this period, the very first player to step into that central area with him will gain a nullification barrier of their own and start taking damage as well. The problem is, as a tank, you do not want to get this because this ability is used by ranged players primarily to soak up the orbs that are falling down from the sky, and you can't be bothered to do that as a tank. So it is critical that when the boss's current absorb shield gets low, you are not in the middle, because if he goes to the middle and starts to recharge and you're the first player inside, you're going to accidentally get that shield and no one else can get it for that phase once someone has picked it up the first time. So, like I said, just watch his shield level, make sure you're not in the center, and it would also help if you notice it's about to go into that phase, you can pull the boss away, and that will just kind of invariably force the melee to come with you, so you can help them out in that way as well. Now, while the boss is in the center and recharging his shield, he will continuously spawn volatile anomaly adds. And these are just basic adds that need to be picked up by you or the other tank, but not shared. So decide beforehand which of the tanks is going to pick these adds up, and you don't really want to have them split up. The reason for this is that when the anomalies die, they will do a pretty massive area of effect hit on the entire raid. However, if you pull the anomalies into an existing suppression field, which are the purple circles that you see all around the room, and then kill them, the adds will be silenced while they're in the field, and therefore they will not use the explosion ability when they die. The important thing to note, however, is if you are tanking the adds and you pull them into the suppression field, you will also be silenced as a tank. So it's critical that before you step into the field to kill them off, you use a personal cooldown of some kind, so that you can help mitigate that damage, because you will take extra damage while in the field, or obviously call for cooldowns and extra healing from your raid. But if you do it properly, you can gather up all the anomalies when the phase is over and no more are spawning, and then you can step into the field, call for AE damage to kill them off, and they'll all be silenced, and you'll be good. So that's the basic idea to handling the anomalies. The final four abilities are all cast by the boss, and they are Expel magic types. So the first and most frequent, as well as the most important ability for tanks in the entire fight, is Expel Magic Arcane. This is cast on the current tank at the time, and it will cause a 10-second debuff on the tank. During this 10 seconds, there will be little tiny arcane bombs that will drop at the location of the tank that will explode in a small radius after 1.5 seconds. And this explosion damage is quite significant. What this means is that when Arcane is used on the current tank, the off tank at the time needs to taunt quickly to grab the boss, and the tank that was afflicted by Arcane needs to start kiting, just run away. This will then cause the arcane bombs to drop 1.5 seconds later and explode, and not actually hit anybody because you're running away from where they're dropping. You have a small period to do so. So if you get Arcane, call for a taunt swap from your other tank so they can grab the boss, and you just run away from everybody. The key here, as I mentioned before, is if your positioning is good, you will not have to run through any other players. But if the raid is positioned poorly, or you don't have a clear path, you may be forced to run near other players, which is probably bad news. So just kite when you have Arcane until it's over, and then you can come back and wait for the other tank to get Arcane and then grab it off them, and so on. Expel Magic Frost creates a very giant frost orb that floats around in the room and targets a random range member when it does so, but it doesn't do anything really significant. It does damage and snares you based on the distance you are from the center. So if you're really close to the spawn, just use a movement boost or run away as quickly as you can, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't move at all, it's stationary, so once you are safely out of it, you're fine. And then finally, we'll just talk about both Fire and Shadow Expels at the same time. Neither of them are very significant for you as a tank. They're debuffs on the entire raid. The Fire forces players to either spread out if they're ranged or get dispelled manually if they're melee. And otherwise, you won't have to really think about it. It's a very minor amount of damage. And as a tank, you shouldn't be stacked with anyone anyway, so you don't need to worry about spreading out at all. For Shadow, it's just a healing absorption. So if you want to help the raid a bit, you can use a personal cooldown when that is applied to help your healers just ever so slightly. But again, otherwise it's a pretty insignificant amount. And that should cover it. That is everything to do with tanking for Korog on both Heroic and Normal. Again, it's mostly about handling Arcane properly and then dealing with the add pickups if you're assigned to do so in the barrier recharge phase. Other than that, watch your positioning. Make sure the melee, including yourself, are not in the center when barrier is about to be recharged. And do your best to avoid killing people with Arcane Explosion. So that should do it. Good luck, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.